there's furious controversy about the legitimacy of taking life within the human species. If it's wrong to take the life of a severely brain-damaged human being, it must be equally wrong to take the life of a dog or pig at a comparable mental level. But perhaps it's not wrong to take the life of such a brain-damaged human infant. After all, many people do think that severely brain-damaged infants should be allowed to die. And an infant that is allowed to die ends up just as dead as one that's been killed. In fact, you could say that in this respect, our readiness to kill rather than to allow to die slowly, but that's the one respect in which we treat non-human animals better than we treat humans.
Professor Singer, should a philosopher try and provoke us out of our rusty ideas?
A philosopher is always trying to justify our ideas, but if they cannot be justified, then of course we need to change something. And so there's always the potential for a philosopher being radical and saying that we need to change the way we think. So yes, I mean, in a way you could say if a philosopher didn't say anything that challenged us or made us think again about our preconceived set of ideas, then it wouldn't really be a very worthwhile activity. I mean, you could do that once and say, okay, everything's fine, now we can just go on. But typically philosophy does find things that cannot be justified or defended in the way we think or the way we live. So that's what's provocative about it.
Would you call yourself a radical philosopher?
Well, I know many other people would call me a radical philosopher, and certainly in some respects I am. I mean, one of those respects is that a lot of our thinking comes out of religious traditions that I don't believe in. And I think that as we get beyond what I would see the false comfort of some religious beliefs that perhaps human beings, particularly in the West, have held for millennia, we're going to have to change some ideas that have been quite deep-seated, and so that will make a significant difference to our ethics. So many people see that as radical. I am prepared to follow the logic of ideas where it takes me.
Peter Singer is de meest spraakmakende ethicus ter wereld. De Australische filosoof geeft al jaren les in Princeton in de Verenigde Staten, maar is bovenal dierenrechten- en mensenrechtenactivist. Singer is een utilitarist. Zijn ideeën en zijn acties zijn gebaseerd op het utilitarisme van Jeremy Bentham. Die formuleerde het zo: wat goed is dat wat het grootste geluk brengt aan het grootste aantal mensen.
I think the most important thing about being a utilitarian is that you judge actions in accordance with their consequences. Things are not just right or wrong in themselves, irrespective of the difference they make in the world. And I think that it's important that we make a difference in the world and not that we stick by some abstract principle which might say, for example, always tell the truth, but then might have disastrous consequences for everyone. And I see no point in sticking by a principle without paying attention to the consequences of what you're doing.
De ideeën van Peter Singer zorgen voor nogal wat controverse, vooral op bio-ethisch vlak. Zo verdedigt hij openlijk het recht op euthanasie bij dementerenden en zwaar gehandicapte baby's. Uitspraken die voor heel wat opschudding zorgen.
I suppose the peak of the controversy about my views in bioethics occurred in Germany and in other German-speaking countries, Austria and Switzerland, when I had several invitations withdrawn, speaking invitations, I had conferences and even had to be cancelled. At least two. One was moved across the border from Germany to Maastricht, and another one that was to be held in Austria was completely cancelled. And at one stage when I was speaking in Zurich, I was actually physically attacked. I had someone leap on the stage and take off my glasses and throw them on the floor and smash them with his shoe. This was the result of, I think, to some extent, a misunderstanding of my views, which were my views relating to euthanasia for those born with severe disabilities. And I think some German-speaking people thought that in some way this was reminiscent of the Nazi so-called euthanasia program, which of course was never really a euthanasia program at all. And you know, given that I have a Jewish background, I can only say that I'm pleased that people in Germany are forceful in their condemnation of Nazi policies and want to move completely away from that. But perhaps at this point they were really misled by their commitment to anti-fascist ideas, to seeing things as being in some way linked with the Nazis, which actually had nothing at all to do with it. In fact, came from a completely different point of view, came from the point of view of concern for the individual well-being, not concern for the health of the so-called Aryan folk. So I think this was a very serious and unfortunate misunderstanding of my views. And I'm glad to say that on recent visits to Germany, this period seems to be over, that I've not had that kind of opposition to speaking. But in the late 80s and up to the mid-90s anyway, there was very hostile response to the kinds of things that I was saying that actually prevented me speaking on several occasions.
Could you elaborate on this Jewish background and how important it is for you?
My family came to Australia as refugees from Vienna. They were Jewish, and of course they wanted to leave as soon as the Nazis came to Austria. So I was born after the war. I was born in Australia. I considered myself Australian, and my parents were not religious, but you know, of course I knew about my Jewish heritage. I also knew that tragically all of my grandparents who had not left in time were sent to camps, and only one of them survived. My mother's mother survived and came to Australia, and I had a grandmother, but I did not ever see my other grandmother or either of my grandfathers. They were murdered by the Nazis. So, of course, I'm very aware of racism and of Nazism and what it has done. And I think this has had some sort of influence on my thinking in terms of my abhorrence of racism and of the more powerful causing the weak to suffer through their brutality and their concern for their own interests.